Very good evening to all our friends, comrades and political family, and welcome again to this weekly live broadcast from the Workers' Party of Britain. We've got some cracking contributions lined up for you tonight, including news of this week's campaign for next week's by-election in Helensborough. But as always, first we'll open the floor to our inimitable leader, the Game of Risk world champion for over 4 decades, George Galloway.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Good evening to the members of the Workers' Party and ladies and gentlemen watching who are not yet members, but whom we hope to recruit, if not in the course of this broadcast, then subsequent activities. There's so much to deal with tonight. I'll have to deal with each item relatively briskly and maybe expand on the issues in the question and answer sessions. The first point that you make is the most important one. We are doing such campaigning as is legally permissible in the Helensburgh and Lomond South by-election. It's terrible weather and also terrible political climate, because knocking on doors and talking to people, even some forms of leafleting, is not permitted until next week. Don't ask me what the difference between this week and next week, or why they're having a by-election in a period where nobody is legally allowed to campaign. These are questions that I cannot answer. But we were faced with the by-election, and our colleague Paul Burrows put himself up for it and has gamely campaigned and is now campaigning this moment, campaigning in a campaign that isn't really a campaign. We really owe him and those that have assisted him the great debt of gratitude, because this was our first electoral foray in the most inhospitable circumstances, in a strong conservative seat, and we'll see how well we do. I'm not able to tell you in detail, but later in the week there will be some very heartening public opinion poll news for us. Very encouraging indeed, and likely to shake the houses of the other political leaders and the other political parties in Scotland. So we're going to have a strong end to the week, whatever happens in Helensborough and Lomond South. But it's all part of the one struggle, the one campaign. Paul, I understand, is on the broadcast. I hope he's dried out, but dried out from the rain, I mean, not any other kind of dried out. And no doubt he'll speak to us later, but he's a hero. He needs the Red Banner awarded to him for picking up this gauntlet and taking it right into the heart of the fight. The public opinion poll data I can't give you, because the public opinion poll company requires 48 hours notice of any publication of that data, and that 48 hours is still being served. So forgive me about that, but you'll be very happy indeed with the news that you will see, hopefully come the weekend. The Workers' Party is putting up candidates all over England. Indeed, I was a part of one of the operations where one of our colleagues was persuaded to stand in the local authority elections in England, in the Northwest. I was there while he was being persuaded. He put it on the local community Facebook page, and within an hour and a half he had 150 pledged votes. That's how popular people of substance in their local communities can be, just like that. 150 pledged votes. And we must hope that every pledger had a wife or a husband or 18-year-old children that they could persuade. We are already off and running in that particular contest, but we are fighting all over the country. And that is something that makes me very proud indeed. We've only existed just over a year, and it's been a year in which normal political activity has effectively been suspended. So all of this, all these thousands of members, these scores of branches, and by the time we reach the local elections in May, I expect we'll have the best part of 100 candidates standing. Someone, Tess maybe, can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But people are putting their names forward, not because we expect to win every electoral battle that we fight, certainly not in the beginning, but because these campaigns are part of the Workers' Party's strategy to establish itself as the party of the working class in this island. We have, as you'll see at the end of the week, made an almost miraculous beginning to that in Scotland, and we intend that England should not be left behind. Now, there have been so many other things that I'm involved in, I scarcely know where to start, but I'm going to start with two things that are potentially controversial, and I recognize that members may temporarily be wrong-footed by the blasts of haters that we get on social media on such occasions, and I'm grateful for their fortitude in the face of such blasts. So here's the explanation. Piers Morgan, alone in the entirety of Fleet Street, in the entirety of the broadcast media, as the editor of the Daily Mirror, was a staunch ally of ours in trying to stop the war on Iraq. Now that matters to me, ought to matter to everybody, but it obviously matters to me, maybe more than it matters to most people. Piers Morgan was a part of the Cool Britannia set. He was in and out of Downing Street as the editor of the so-called Labour paper, the Daily Mirror, in and out of soirees and champagne receptions. Can you imagine the kind of courage and steadfastness it required for the editor of the Daily Mirror to maintain a bristling, vibrant, militant opposition to the war in Iraq, and to give over page after page after page of the Daily Mirror to the activities of the anti-war cause, the anti-war movement? In the lead up to the 15th of February 2003, the Daily Mirror became virtually our house journal. And on the day of February 15th, the 2 million march in London, the Daily Mirror became virtually a booklet for us with maps and diagrams and meeting points and vox pops. And this was in the era when there was no social media. Just imagine that, those of you who grew up in the social media age. There was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was no means by which we could convey our anti-war message in amongst the teeth, sharp teeth, of the mass media that hated us, wanted to paint us as lunatics or criminals or both. To have one national daily newspaper absolutely on our side. Don't forget that, because a lot of people obviously have on the left. I'm not sure which part of Piers Morgan's oeuvre the Liberals and the left hate the most, whether it's his stand on Harry and Meghan, about which more in a minute, sorry, or whether it's his persecution of Boris Johnson and Hancock, the health minister, over the coronavirus issue, or maybe they liked Morgan on one but didn't like him on the other. There's been 10,000 causes in Piers Morgan's life. And I've agreed with, I don't know, less than half of them. But I do respect somebody that stands up for what they believe in and doesn't allow themselves to be bullied or browbeaten out of their position. And that's why I said on social media that I was sorry to see Piers Morgan go, but I fully expect that he will bounce back because, as he said to me, when I was sacked from talk radio, a sacking is an opportunity. And so it turned out for me. The mother of all talk shows now is hundreds of times bigger than it was when I was at talk radio. And I personally hope that this sacking of Piers Morgan will also work out positively for him. Ditto on this Harry and Meghan stuff. I'm not a royalist. I don't suppose we have all that many royalists in our ranks. I don't believe in monarchy as a system, in hereditary power. But that's what we've got here in Britain. And we certainly don't prioritize the overthrow of monarchy in our long list of things to do. So we generally don't get involved in royal stories. But if all the people are talking about a royal story, we can hardly bury our heads in the sand or sit on cloud nine and look down our nose at the mass of the British people who are occupied by this Harry and Meghan story. And that's why I had to do it on my show on Sunday. What kind of a show would it have been if it willfully did not cover the issue that would dominate the news agenda over the next few days? Now, I don't know where everyone stands on this issue. Perhaps it's better if we don't stand on either side, but put the legitimate and rational arguments about the claims and counterclaims being made. For me, I care about none of the persona involved, none. But I do care about Britain, and I care about the egregious trashing of Britain's reputation, particularly on the issue of race. There is racism in Britain, of course. There's racism in every country, and not just predominantly white countries either. Racism exists amongst Africans, amongst Arabs, amongst Asians. If you don't know that, then you need to study more. I believe that if you think England is racist, you really obviously haven't lived in France, or in the Netherlands, or in Denmark, or in many, many other places in the world. Perhaps especially the United States of America. It takes a certain chutzpah to say you're leaving Britain because of racism, and you're going to live in the United States, a country built on slavery, a country built on the bones of millions of enslaved Africans, and which continued the Jim Crow apartheid system well into the 1960s, and which, by all accounts, is not entirely free of racism even now. And I saw millions of British people watching the royal wedding of Harry and Meghan And most of them seemed rather delighted to welcome the new princess into the ranks of the royal family. Most people saw it as a real positive. I've never seen so many racists as the hundreds of thousands I saw lined up on the route in Windsor to cheer the happy couple go by. Now, I'm the last person to defend the attitude of British newspapers and other trash media in relation to Meghan Markle. I'm not even going to entertain the idea of attempting to explain any of that. But I don't want the British people to be painted as racist when I don't believe that they are guilty as charged. And so that was my take on it. I promise not to dwell on royal matters in the future if we can possibly avoid it. But we are, or I am, in the position I'm in, broadcasting 7 days a week, live for the most part, 6 of those 7 live. There's no hiding place from issues that you might otherwise like to have left alone. And I hope that the members understand my position on that. I have to take a view on everything, and it has to be a view consistent with my own beliefs and my own conscience. I'm sure that you would not expect me to do otherwise. Of course, there are very many other stories going on. Perhaps the most important was the report of the United Nations rapporteur into the impact of US sanctions against the people of Venezuela, which are literally murdering people. And the rapporteur singled out Britain and Portugal. I have no idea why Portugal, as being the 2 leading lieutenants in the self-declared campaign to starve the people of Venezuela into submission to Washington's will, into accepting as their president that even the Venezuelan opposition doesn't accept is their leader, namely Juan Guaido. Now, the EU has de-recognized the preposterous popinjay Juan Guaido. The High Court in London refused to hand over Venezuela's gold bars to him. But the government of Britain continues to tail end what was the policy of the Donald Trump administration, and which this week has now officially become the policy of the Joe Biden administration. Meet the new boss. He's just the same as the old boss. Now, Washington's response to the UN rapporteur's report was that, well, things were going wrong in the Venezuelan economy before we introduced these sweeping sanctions. Well, insofar as that is true, how is that a justification for making them far, far worse by the sanctions that you have imposed? But in any case, we face the facts. The oil price collapse severely damaged the economy of Venezuela, which is an overwhelmingly oil-dependent economy. And with no real reserves other than the ones they foolishly left in the Bank of England, prey to Juan Guaido's legal action, no real reserves, because Hugo Chavez spent Venezuela's money. On what? On schools, on houses, on hospitals, on computers for poor children, on increasing the food supply into the bellies of the poorest Venezuelans, who went from a level, in many cases, of malnourishment to one of the most well-nourished populations of children in Latin America, who went from low levels of literacy to one of the world's highest levels of literacy. Venezuela spent its money on massive transfers of wealth from the richest Venezuelans to the poorest. I don't think at the pearly gates that Hugo Chavez would have had much difficulty persuading the Lord that this was a good use of Venezuela's God-given resources. But it hasn't been enough to persuade Washington, who Joe Biden this week announced that the US still recognizes Guaido as the president, still refuses to allow anyone to release Venezuelan sovereign wealth stored around the world in banks, and absolutely refused to lift any of the sanctions that they have imposed on the people of Venezuela. And then when the impact of those sanctions is clear for all to see, they use that as an argument for regime change. Look at the state of Venezuela, they say. We need regime change, when it's their policy which has helped to beggar the country. So we make absolutely no bones about this. We oppose all imperial crimes against the peoples of the empire. And in particular, we defend those that have stood up against the empire. And we always will do so, whatever the cost, personally or collectively in politics, there might be associated with that. Just a few more words on the Labour Party. I have to return to this because since we last spoke, I think the man that was going to be 20 points ahead of the Conservatives has now become 13 points behind. Keith Starmer is destroying the Labour Party in front of our eyes. And you know what? I couldn't be happier about that. Not because I want the Tories to occupy the red wall, but because I want us to occupy the red wall. It's good that it is increasingly, abundantly clear to the working people in this country that the Labour Party has nothing to do with them, wants nothing to do with them except their votes, certainly will not speak for them, will not stand up for them, doesn't like what it hears from them, doesn't like what it sees them do in their lives, has no cultural affinity with them whatsoever, doesn't do the same things, think the same things, read the same things, play the same games, watch the same stuff. The Labour Party is a party now of upwardly mobile, middle class communities in the leafier parts, the wealthier parts of Britain's cities, and that is it. the Labour Party does not speak to the working class mass, even in London, as Sadiq Khan is about to find out in the London mayoral election, when his vote, his majority plummets. They don't stand up for the working people anywhere in the country. They're frauds. And when people say to me, someone did this week, have you still got one foot in the Labour Party? I say, I wish them only oblivion, because they thought that the working class had nowhere else to go. But the working class does now have somewhere else to go. The Workers' Party of Britain does what it says on the tin. It fights for the working class people of Britain. Tess, thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, George. Oh, brilliant. Fantastic to hear. And you're so right. We met a guy the other day. There were a couple of builders up here in Helensborough. I'm up here doing the campaigning. And there were a couple of builders sitting outside a house, and I gave them a leaflet. And the guy said, "Oh, I'm not reading that. Is he some pen pusher?" And I said, "No, he's a bus driver." "Oh, well, I'll read it then. I'll have a little look." And he started talking about Labour, and there should never be a sir in the Labour Party. A sir, you know? And we've had quite a good response up here. Labour came fourth in the last election. It's very Tory, then you've got the SNP, and then Liberal Democrats, but Tory are clear ahead. And we've delivered over 2,000 leaflets in the last 2 days. And speaking to locals, there's a massive gap in Helensborough between massive sort of footballers' houses and naval base houses, and then these two very delineated estates where all the poor people live, which luckily are in our area. So the greatest thing about today was I was in a taxi with Paul Burrows this morning, and the taxi driver recognized him from getting a leaflet through her door yesterday. He had a mask on and she still recognized him. That was the highlight of the day for me. So I'm going to pass you on now to Peter Higgins. He's our regional secretary for Scotland, and he's going to be talking about party building up here in Scotland, which is where I am now, not in Wales. Can you unmute, Pete? There you go.
How you doing? Thanks a lot, Tess. George.
Hi, Pete.
George, I remember you said something a couple of weeks back when you were talking about the project here in Helensborough, and you said that you were sure we were all very busy. And I thought then that it was past time that we give you an update and let you know what's actually been going on. It's been all systems go, and I think it's been great for a couple of reasons. As you said, it's important for the Workers' Party to get our name out there and our brand out there in Tory strongholds and elsewhere, to let people know that we are the new party of the working class. And I think secondly, what I've seen as well is how good it's been for the branch as well, to stop spinning our wheels and to be doing something. You know, we're nothing if we're not doing something. And it's been good for all of us. It's brought us together in terms of cooperation, collective effort. It's been fantastic. Paul Burrows has been a credit to himself and to us in terms of the enthusiasm with which he's taken on this task. I don't envy him one bit. I think the team, the crew have done very well as well. And it's nice to see that the organising team up there have made contact with them and are helping them out. So like I said, it's been all systems go. We had a page spread in the Helensborough Advertiser, which was great. Paul set forth his and our vision. We've had invitations from local environmental busybodies to put videos of our views on the environment on their YouTube channel. We've been conducting interviews within the team for social media. Plenty of things have been going on. But I think the person best suited to give his view and conception of the experience is Paul himself, who's here tonight.
Thank you, Pete. Paul's been brilliant. He's been brilliant today. He'll be speaking in a little while. He's been all sorts of roles today: campaigner, bodyguard. It's a really long story. We'll tell you all about it sometime. Okay, next up we've got Helen. Let's see if I can find you there, Helen. She's going to be talking to us about the pay rise for nurses, or the not very pay rise for nurses. Can you unmute there, Hel?
Hello, thank you, Tess. Yeah, just on a side note, I'm glad to hear you standing up for Piers Morgan, George. And I expected you to as well. I thought that you would. It's easy for people on the left. He's an easy person, easy target for them, isn't he? Because they know they've only to say his name and spit, and they're going to get a round of applause from their liberal friends and things. But it's, you know, you're very savvy and you take issues on their own merit and things. You don't get on bandwagons and things like that. And I like that, you know. That's part of, you know, I want a leader that's not just politically savvy, but has common sense like that, and doesn't, you know, isn't swayed by the masses and things like that. So that was just a side note.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Okay. Now, yes, I was trying to ring the Moats, actually, Mother of All talk shows on Sunday about this issue, but I couldn't get through. So you must be busy, which is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very surprised at the result of the poll regarding the NHS nurses' pay and whether they should get more than a 1% pay rise or not. I was very surprised at the results of it. And I was watching a BBC interview with Sir Keith, and they were asking him the same question, you know, and should the public sector as well as nurses be getting a 1% pay rise or more than a 1%? And he gave a token yes, as he does, not in any meaningful way, and he certainly wasn't committing to any figure or saying much more than that. But the woman, her response, she said to him, "Are you being irresponsible, financially irresponsible, by wanting this pay rise? You know, is it economically irresponsible sort of thing?" And I thought, if he had anything about him, he'd say to that woman, "How much money are you getting paid?" Because you can guarantee she's on a 3-figure salary, or, you know, thereabouts, working for the BBC in that position. And it's, you know, this is what they come, you know, she's telling the nurses that they can't, they're being irresponsible by wanting a 1%, you know, a few more quid in their pocket, so they're not having to ferret in bins looking for leftover pizzas, or, you know, queuing at food banks or whatever. And this is how they get the working class. I get it from my neighbours all the time, you know, and poor people and people who are struggling to put food on the table saying, well, no, we'll crash the economy, you know, leave it to them. They know what they're doing. These people in charge, that's why they're in charge. This is how they get them. And I think we really need to dispel this myth, George, don't you think?
Well, that's a very beautiful and important contribution. I'm grateful for what you said at the beginning. The kind of leadership of Mr. Baldwin, the former Conservative leader, was, "I'm their leader, I must follow them." And our attitude is, we are their leaders, we're going over there, and we want you to follow us for the following reasons. That's what leadership really is. Not licking your finger and holding it up to the wind to see which way the wind is blowing. But the results of the poll were, as I said several times in the show, something of a shock also to me. And we must contemplate very seriously what the results mean. They could mean, of course, more than one thing. People who have a point of view on something, they see a poll on Twitter, they vote on it. They're not necessarily even watching or listening to the show. They can just have voted on Twitter. They may be completely hostile to the show, to me, to us, to the nurses, to the unions. So everybody needs to vote on these things and make sure that everyone they know votes on them, so that our strength or weakness is at least accurately measured. Secondly, there is an historic problem of false consciousness amongst working class people, which has been carefully inculcated by the power, and certainly not inoculated against by Labour and those that are charged with and get paid for representing the working class in union leaderships or in parliament or in councils and so on. And this false consciousness frequently expresses itself most succinctly in questions of pay. When I was on Talk Sport many years ago, the British Airways cabin crew were on strike. They were members of my union, then the Transport and General Workers Union. And I, in any case, as a regular flyer at that time with British Airways, flying back and forward from London to Glasgow, was 100%, of course, behind the cabin crews. But it was one of the most difficult campaigns over many weeks that I had endured. And it was other workers that were calling the show and denouncing the demands of, which wasn't even, by the way, about money. It was about numbers. It was about how many crew were going to be on each flight. And so passengers had an interest in keeping the numbers up. The workers had an interest in keeping the numbers up. But the vitriol from other workers about the cabin crew, and I used to be extremely exasperated, and I'd say, you know, how is it putting any potatoes on your plate if the British Airways workers don't fight for their rights? The opposite is true. If the British Airways workers fight and win, it will be easier for you to fight and win in the future. And the converse, of course, equally being true. So we have a job to do to struggle for the interests of the working class as a whole, and to persuade the working class of what their interests are, because many have lost sight, or in these times have never known what their interests truly are. Don't forget, I'm much older than you. I lived through a period where tens of millions of working class people knew what their interests were. Even if they were confused on other political matters, they knew that they were workers, and the workers had a side in conflicts like these. So we have to be savvy, to use your word. We have to box more clever. The unions better make their case more clearly, because there's a feeling out there amongst other workers that nurses are taking home 38,000, 39,000 pounds a year. Well, first of all, they're not taking it home, and secondly, most of them are not on anything like that. But that's what the power of propaganda is. A lot of people think, well, I'm on 21, 22, 25, and they're on much more than me. Why should they get more than 1%? What about me? I'll be lucky still to have a job. These are arguments we're going to have. My last point, what you said Keith Starmer should have said is exactly what I would have said. And that's the difference between him and me. My very first answer would have been, really? How much money are you earning for holding a microphone in front of my face? Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Helen. That's such a good point. And there's this strange psychology going around in general, isn't there? And it's difficult to understand these counterintuitive attitudes that we can see people have. To us, it seems a no-brainer that nurses should get more, and you see the arguments, and it's very difficult to understand each other's argument with these big gaps. It's a bit like the royals. So many working class people love the royals that you can't just dismiss them and jump on the smash the royalty bandwagon, because people feel they need that. They need something for whatever nefarious reasons that have been built up over the years. People need what they need. And the working class, you can't go taking stuff from them all the time. We need to understand each other more and not just be, you know, you nasty royalist or you nasty Republican. We need to understand each other as a team. We're a team. So speaking of teams, we have Monsieur Paul Burrows, hero of the hour. He's
Bravo.
Here live this evening. Here we are, Paul. Can you unmute, darling?
That's me. Thanks, Tess. Yeah, thanks, everyone, and thanks to George for opening the meeting. And yeah, I'd like to begin by thanking Eleanor, Tess, Ruben, Ed, and all the hard work they've done leafleting in the wind and rain over the past couple of days. Pete as well at the Workers' Party, and Ian as well, who come through. It's just been fantastic support, and I'm just really glad that I can be representing the working class people. Because like it's been spoke about tonight, Starmer just doesn't represent, or the Labour Party represent, the working class people. They have no interest in us. All this tripe with him today, chatting about the nurses' pay, it's just like the clapping. It's all for show. And I'm really glad that I can be out there and hopefully put a good showing in a big Tory area. I might got uphill battle, but it's going to be worth it to get the party's name out there, and it'll be the first of many, hopefully. And I'd just like to say thanks, to George, and it was people like George that have got me inspired in politics, real socialist politics, not this Blairites and these phony socialists, as we say, these liberal lefties. They don't represent what working class politics is, and it's about time now we've got a political home with the Workers' Party, and I'm prepared to fight tooth and nail for it. So just like to thank everyone again, and thanks for all the support. Cheers.
Bravo. Beautiful, beautiful statement, Paul. And I wish you every success, and success is not about winning. We're not going to win a rock solid seat. Success is the work that went on in the campaign, getting the party's name and existence out there, showing the kind of class, working class, that we have in our ranks, in Paul as our candidate and his friends that are working in the campaign, such as they have been able to do. That's what counts. That's the success. The success at this stage in our development is the taking part. Winning comes later. Hopefully not that much later.
You never know, George, you might be in with a chance. We were looking at the voting numbers last night, and there are 3 seats available. And the lowest number of seats that got in were 400 and something. So considering the amount of leaflets we've dished out, you never know that we could have a big sweep. Stranger things have happened. Anyway, okay, Bob, it's you next. You're coming on to talk about housing. Can you unmute, darling? You got you there, Bob?
Yeah.
Hi, go for it, mate.
Hi there. Good evening. Yeah, this, to George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
I hope you and yours are all well, keeping safe from the coronaviruses.
Yes, thank you so much.
That's good. Firstly, before I get on to the main point, we're talking about Keir Starmer. Yeah, he's. I wouldn't say he's a block of wood. I'd say he's a bit of bogwood that is in my aquarium, because there's more life in that than there is in any other piece of wood. But let's move on to my main point. I wanted to know, basically, have you heard of these 3D printed houses?
I haven't, no.
Right, well...
I don't fancy living in one.
Well, they're on YouTube, right? For a single person, they can build one in 24 hours for $4,000. The rest of the building, like the plumbing, the woodwork, electrics, is done by normal people, like normal tradespeople. So it's not robbing everybody of work, but it's a machine that they actually, you can check it out on YouTube if you'd like to. I think it'd be one way of stemming the problems with homelessness, because a lot of people who are living on the streets are single. And this is, like this $4,000 that I mentioned, and, the fact that it can be done, the main building can be built in 24 hours.
Mm. Well, we will, of course, look at that. My good friend Lou Macari, who is doing heroic work for the homeless people in Stoke, former Celtic and Manchester United Scotland football star, is winning great plaudits for the extremely innovative housing units for homeless people that he has somehow found and developed and fundraised for. So there is, of course, a case for emergency solutions. And we wouldn't turn our face away from that. But there's no reason at all for anybody to be homeless. First of all, there are hundreds of thousands of spaces that either are unlet, unlived in housing accommodation, and in an era where the big office block is about to become a thing of the past, where huge company headquarters and big department stores and so on are about to undergo what will be a commercial revolution of decentralization, home working, and so on. There's actually millions of potential houses. But what is lacking is a government that is dedicated to seeing housing not as a source of profit for the owners of that land and space, but for the good of the people. And I feel sure that in the years to come, we will be the leading campaigners for example, the reason nurses and firefighters and police officers, even public servants, railway workers, are completely unable to live anywhere near they work. Where they work is the exorbitant cost of finding accommodation anywhere near their workplace. And so you've got huge commutes and all the costs that go with that. And it's not only a financial cost, it's cost of family life, cost of health, and so on. So we'll be arguing. If there's an office block, turn it into houses. If there's a department store that's going bust, turn it into housing accommodation in the name of the local authority, because that's the kind of tenure that we believe in, where you can elect your landlord and you can unelect your landlord if you don't think they've been doing a good enough job. Thanks very much for raising that.
Thanks, Paul. Really good points there. And but what George says, of course, is right, that there's so many buildings that are left empty and unoccupied. We need a solution that reverses the situation. That's what's happened with the flat that we're staying in here in Helensborough. It's clearly an old council flat that's been sold privately and is now an Airbnb. So, okay, next up, we have a lovely chap who I met last night who's been helping us with our campaign up here. This is Ian. Can you unmute there, Dal? There you go.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, Ian, hi.
All right, thanks, guys. Tess, great job. Scottish accent needs a bit of work, though, but good attempt. Just wanted to come on and follow up on the words of Paul and Peter as well, and some of the work we've been doing up here. And I think it's great that you touched on, George, the fight for the NHS workers and the parallels with that with BA staff. A fight for one worker or even one group of workers is a fight for all workers, and we have to stand together. And that's what we're doing here as well in Helensborough. And Paul, who is making history as our first candidate, and I'm very proud to be part of that campaign, even if it's just handing out leaflets, spreading the word on Twitter. We've all got a part to play in this, and Paul's the face of the campaign. But I think it's important to note, as Paul and Peter and George have highlighted, there's a whole collective team of people that are working day, night to help get the Workers' Party message out there to the working people of Britain. And as you've seen, we have candidates coming up in the May elections, here in Scotland as well, throughout the country. And those faces, they're not just one person, it's a collective group of people working for this party. So whatever you can do, whether it be handing out leaflets, obviously when restrictions allow, whether it be canvassing, or even just giving us a voice, telling the people around you to join the working class movement, join the party, and help make a difference to the politics here throughout the UK.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Ian. That really said it all. I just want to add that the law changes next Monday, and a far wider, but still not complete, set of campaigning tactics will be legal. And so next Tuesday, I'll be launching my campaign in the south of Scotland, which is partly the rural idyll that I live in, but also massive industrial and post-industrial parts of West and East Scotland. So coal miners, steel workers, power workers, electricity workers, huge numbers in Ayrshire, in Carrick, Cumnock, Doon Valley, in Irvine Valley, in Kilmarnock, in Ayr, and in Tranent and Preston Pans and Clydesdale and the southern part of Midlothian. These are industrial heartlands which are part of my constituency, along with the rural and border areas in between the two of them. So I've got 331,000 doors to knock, except I'm not allowed to knock them. So I've somehow got to reach them with my voice from a soapbox. And I need people to help me hand out leaflets to the people that gather socially distant, to hear what I have to say. As I said to you before, we have to reach these people mainly by paid post, because no party, never mind one as small and young as ours, could possibly think of delivering 331,000 doors. So we are doing a mass paid post leaflet now. They'll start to go out next week. Then we'll do one other more targeted paid mail drop, and then we'll do the free post that the Royal Mail gives you in the electoral period itself. So by May the 6th, at least 500,000 people in Scotland are going to have heard from me. And when I give you, as I will at the end of this week, the public opinion data that we paid to have polled and are absolutely delighted with the results, you'll realize that what we're doing is making an impact, a very serious impact. And you'll be able to measure that by the length of certain other faces elsewhere on the political spectrum. Tess, it remains, if I may, for me to congratulate you on becoming the latest of our 5 organizers. 5 organizers at the center and working in all these regions is a tremendous achievement. The party center just got even stronger by your appointment as a national organizer of the Workers' Party. So I congratulate you. I'm delighted. I knew from the beginning that you would become a very important political leader for us now and in the future. So congratulations to Tess and to all the others at the centre who produce the leaflets and organize the teams. And of course, a big thank to those teams who actually make those leaflets into material at hand in the hands of the voters, raising our flag, raising our profile, and as Ian just said, making history. We have made history with this Helensborough campaign. The weirdest campaign climate that we could possibly have imagined, where you're actually not even supposed to approach somebody to hand them a leaflet. But we have, by one means or another, we've really put our footprint down there. And we're going to put an even bigger footprint down in the Scottish Parliament elections on May the 6th. Thanks very much to all of you, and keep the flag flying high. Thanks, Tess.
Thanks, George. I'm a little bit teary now. It's been a ride, I'll tell you. A year ago, I would have never thought that I'd be here. You know, I was in a field all alone, and now I'm here introducing you on the live broadcast every week. It sort of blows my mind a little bit. So we were going to have Josie talking and a couple of other people, but we've run out of time. So I guess we'll have them next week. Join us again and get involved as much as you can. Thank you to all our contributors. Thank you to everyone who's been involved with the campaign this week. Thank you to George, and thanks to Paul, superhero, Paul Burrows. And I think he's proof that working class candidates are some of the best candidates you'll ever find. We're giving people the choice that they need. There's someone new to vote for. There's a new kid in town. That's what I've been saying since yesterday. Okay, thanks. Join us next week, everyone. Until then, Nostar, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.